Who has your heart? I want it. And I've had it before.
It's not impossible for Jesus to pray for Judas's heart while still saying to the Father, but not your will, but not my will, but yours be done.
Greetings, y'all, and welcome to See Things Above TV. I'm your host, Lou Ciccone. So today we're taking a look at the trailer for The Chosen Season 5. Now, this was aired during a live stream where Dallas Jenkins was engaging with fans and telling them about the upcoming season. Now, once I saw the clip that we are going to take a look at today, man, a bunch of red flags went off in my mind, and I believe a lot of other people had the same reaction. All right, so we're going to get into that in a second, man. But if y'all like content like this, y'all know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. But without further ado, let's get into this video.
If I am no use to your kingdom, then I am nothing. You have a choice to make, Judas. I'm listening. Who you belong to? Who has your heart? I want it. And I've had it before. You followed me willingly. I want to continue. There's nothing more that I want than that. I will pray for you.
Now, as you can see in this trailer, we have Judas having this conversation with Jesus, and Jesus says something that is completely unbiblical and something that Jesus would never say. First of all, he says to Judas that I want your heart. I want your heart, and I once had it. So this implies that Judas was actually a believer, and that somehow now he is no longer a believer, which according to Jesus' own words in the Gospels, that's not possible. So that's one part of it. This Jesus of the chosen is telling Judas that I once had your heart. It is so cultural Christianity-like to say, please invite Jesus into your heart and all this stuff. It's like this weak Jesus who's begging to come into your heart when the Bible talks about the Jesus that calls his people. And once his people have placed their faith in him, they cannot be snatched out of his hand. That's John 10:28. Jesus makes that clear. But this Jesus of the chosen is begging for Judas's heart. He's saying, I want your heart. Judas is withholding this from Jesus, but this fake Jesus, and he wants it. That's one part of it. Then the second problem is that he is now in this scene praying, saying that he's going to pray for Judas. He's going to pray for Judas. And so what is he praying for Judas for? He's praying just by virtue of what we're seeing in the scene here. He is praying that he can have that heart back. That's what he's praying for in this scene. Now, Dallas Jenkins is going to try to explain this away, and we're going to watch him go around in circles, but he is going to make a really weak attempt at trying to explain how that is not what he's implying in the scene.
Also, another issue that might come up, or a question, is when Jesus says, I've had your heart and I want it. Now, no, this is not referring to salvation. I don't actually believe you can just gain and lose your salvation at your own will, at any moment in time. And I'm not going to get into the whole Calvinism versus Arminianism debate here. But no, I'm not denying the supremacy or the foreknowledge of Jesus. But when he says, I've had your heart and I want it, that can be interpreted a couple different ways, but how we're interpreting it is, of course, that Judas did believe in Jesus and now might not. Because if Jesus could pray for unbelievers while they were crucifying him, it seems, and this is another Dr. Huffman quote, it seems that Jesus could pray for Judas even while Judas was planning to betray him. So all of these issues come up in a scene like this. And Dr. Effman also says, could Jesus pray to God the Father, asking for Judas Iscariot to not betray him? Well, we'll get to that. So those are some of the issues that have come up, and I wanted to be clear on where we stand on some of this. But then the question must be asked, so what's happening here? What's happening in the scene? If we're not denying the supremacy of Jesus and his foreknowledge, if we're not denying that he knew that Judas was going to betray him, and that it's not necessarily, we don't know, that he's trying to get him, get the Father to change Judas's mind, what is happening here? So I'll break it down one at a time as well. Matthew 5:44. This is the most simple explanation of this scene and of Jesus' phrase. Matthew 5:44. Reading it just to make sure I don't mess it up. Pray for your enemies and those who persecute you. Luke 6. Luke 6, when there's like about an 8 to 10 verse range where it talks about some of the stuff, and here's a couple of excerpts. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. And then later, but love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So in all of these passages, he's talking about praying for your enemies, praying for those who curse you, praying for those who do evil. Jesus did not say, but I won't, because I happen to be a member of the Trinity and don't need to pray. So he did not say that. There are, of course, this is the second main point, there are many ways to pray for someone, many reasons to do so. Compassion is a big one. Jesus could have must have had compassion for Judas in many ways. He can pray out of sorrow. There are many psalms that the Jews would have prayed at that time, including Jesus, that were songs of lament. He had compassion for those who rejected him. He had compassion and sorrow for Jerusalem. Again, so Jesus did not say in this scene, I'll pray for you, Judas, that you change your mind. He said, I'll pray for you, which can mean any number of things, and there are many reasons to pray for someone.
Dallas tries to spin this idea that Jesus is simply praying for Judas. He could be praying for him for a number of reasons. But as we saw in the scene, the reason he's praying for him in this scene is clearly for that heart that he once had to be once again belonging to him, and for Judas to fully believe in him again. That's clearly what he's praying for in this scene. There's no other way to interpret it. So to try to spin this and say, give us all these categories that Jesus could have been praying for this, Jesus said to pray for your enemies. All of those things may be true, but that's not what's happening in this scene. When Jesus prays for his disciples, he prays to the Father and says, I have lost none except for the son of perdition, meaning Judas. And he prays for unity. He prays for love amongst the brethren. He prays for them to be one with him as he is with the Father. So Jesus is praying for these things and praying for their faith again to be strengthened. There isn't a place where Jesus is praying for any of his disciples and somehow begging that they will believe in him. You're just not going to find it. It's not there. So to try to create this category is highly misleading, and it's just wrong for Dallas Jenkins to be playing with the scriptures like this. Dallas Jenkins' so-called council of people that help him figure out stuff and make sure that it's biblically sound are completely off in this. It doesn't matter how many degrees they have or the scholars, what level of scholarship that they've attained to. Listen, you can know a lot of stuff about things and still be wrong in how you're applying it. Perhaps the most shameful part of Dallas Jenkins' whole statement is when he tries to say, because in the Garden of Gethsemane, we see that Jesus prayed for not his will, but the Father's will to be done, that he could possibly be praying for his will, which is to save Judas, yet he knows that that's not the Father's will.
Previously, I said in this video that Jesus and the Father's wills were linked. And I said even inextricably linked. And that is, yes, it's true. But believe it or not, maybe not always. That sounds heretical. But in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus actually said, not my will, but yours be done. Not mine, but yours. Because in that moment, he was actually, in fact, saying, could you take this cup from me? Now, scholars have debated what exactly that means, and eventually you'll see that scene portrayed, but it is absolutely unarguable that he said, I want your will to be done, not mine, which, of course, says that in that moment, he was asking for a potential change from the plan. That seems to be the most likely scenario for a comment like that. Of course, there's people who disagree, and that's fine. I don't claim that I have the monopoly on every single theological debate. But because I'm reading a note here, he also, on the cross, it was similar. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Asking the Father, imploring the Father. It's not impossible for Jesus to pray for Judas's heart, while still saying to the Father, but not your will, but not my will, but yours be done. Dr. Jesse Stone is another one of our theological scholars who, for Come and See, said that very thing. That it absolutely is possible for Jesus to be praying for Judas's heart and to possibly even say to the Father, could he still be saved from this? Could he not betray me? But not your will, not my will, but yours be done. That's not impossible. Now, we don't say in the show that that's what it is. We say Jesus is saying to Judas, I'll pray for you.
He actually implies that, which is blasphemous. At some level, that just feels completely blasphemous for you to play around with the scriptures like that and now attribute things to Jesus that are just completely foreign to the Bible. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is dealing with the anguish of bearing the sin of all those who would believe in him. And in being the sin bearer, he has to become the object of the Father's wrath. The weight of that not only has a physical effect on Jesus, where he is sweating blood and is profusely distressed, but it is much more what is happening internally that is going on and causing him to feel this anguish. And in that moment is when he prays that prayer, still submitting to the Father's will, still aligned with the Father in this plan of salvation. So there isn't this category where Jesus had his own plans and the Father had his own plans, and now Jesus is trying to negotiate for something. This is foolishness. It's absolute foolishness. And then to look at that time, which is one instance that we see in Scripture, which is very complicated, but one instance that we see, and then to somehow say, now that opens the door for Jesus to now have all these categories where he is praying for something and it's not necessarily, quote unquote, the Father's will. I mean, this is a bunch of baloney. It's an absolute bunch of baloney. And I think he should just be ashamed of what he's saying here.
A key point about this, when he says, I've had your heart, it used to belong to me and I want it. He's not necessarily referring to salvation. Now, of course, he wants everyone's heart. He wants salvation, but the crucifixion hasn't even happened yet. True salvation hasn't happened. The true act of salvation has not actually occurred just yet. But we're referring to the fact that Judas absolutely was a follower of Jesus and absolutely, most assuredly believed in him. He had authority to cast out demons and preach in his name. We showed that in season 3. And it's based on Scripture, where the 12 apostles were sent out 2 by 2, and they had authority to cast out demons and to preach and with authority and to heal the sick. And Judas was part of that. And so I believe Judas absolutely was a believer and was a follower of Jesus. Whether or not he had salvation and then lost it, that's a debate for the Calvinists and the Arminians to have. But we're referring to his belief. Your heart belonged to me, you believed in me, and I want it.
Dallas Jenkins also implies that Judas was absolutely a believer because he casted out demons. Well, Matthew 7 would dispute that completely. And these are the words of Jesus himself. Many people will come to him saying, Lord, Lord, didn't we do all these things in your name? Cast out demons, the very same thing that Dallas is saying that Judas did. And Jesus will turn to them and say, depart from me, I never knew you. And we know that the work of the Antichrist will be to deceive people with signs and wonders. So to somehow say because he performed miracles, we know this guy was definitely saved at some point, but he lost his salvation. I mean, man, this stuff is terrible. I find it very concerning, not only how Dallas Jenkins plays with the scriptures here, but then how people just cheer this stuff on in the comment sections of these videos. I urge you, if you think this show is a great Christian thing, to really examine the text and to ask yourself if you believe in the sufficiency of Scripture. Ask yourself that, because at the heart of it, that is the root of the problem, is that there is a lack of belief in the sufficiency of the Scripture when the Bible itself tells us that it is sufficient for us for salvation and for all spiritual well-being and everything that we need to know in order to honor God and live a godly life. We are in a culture where people feel this freedom to play around with the text and to add things and to talk about revelation outside of the Bible. And all of this opens people up to embracing foolish stuff like this and thinking that simply because it's entertaining and it plucks at your heartstrings, that it's actually pleasing to God. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. All right? God bless y'all, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.